Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TND&D, where I'm no longer alone. The last episode of this podcast, I was by myself, but now we have James with me. Say hello.
Hello.
Say. We've said that a lot, and we are the two primary DMs of our group that we play D&D with.
Yes.
Because I DM most of the things, and then James DMs something as well, so we have experience.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
talking about, by request from a bloke called Nate the Human, thank you, I believe that you are a human and totally not an alien or a frog.
I'm unsure about him. I think he might be an imposter.
Ah, Nate the Human is sus, boys. I feel
He's
so
sus
bad
as
for
fuck.
saying that. I'm gonna cry. Uh, but yeah, so world building, James. World building. Have you ever built a
Yes,
world?
world building. I've built a few worlds in my time. Have only ever really had the chance to run one. Um, but yeah, I've I'm mainly more into reading into world building. I've ran a couple games of Eberron, one of my favorite settings of all time, and obviously currently I'm sort of running a game in your world, but also it's Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So
Yep.
there's a lot of fun world building in Mad Mage. There's a lot of interesting stuff in it, so that's why I'm interested in that.
Hell yeah. I have myself done a bit of world building. I think I've only ever really made one. Uh, I
You just
started
kind of put
others.
everything into that one.
It makes it easier for me. Uh, I
Yeah.
I've had moments where I'm like, let's make somewhere else, and I'm like, but order. I like that place. So I've stuck to that mostly because it's my bread and butter. I could tell you anything about the history of anywhere in that entire world, and it's great. I'm very proud of my baby, and I am running a campaign there right now that is, I would probably say, my main campaign, just in general, the one that I am focusing most of my attention into because the other two are modules. So
Yeah.
I have room to be free and make whatever the heck I want with it. Um, so we're going to be talking a little bit about how to build a world, obviously, but there's a lot of things that people have misconceptions about with world building, and it's how to get started. How do you think is the right way to get started, James?
I always think about what do you want to do for a campaign. Um, I was actually thinking about it earlier today whilst eating my cereals,
Oh, good.
and my thought process was you start off with a theme and a gameplay idea. Both are intertwinable with each other. So themes you can have multiple, and there's loads of different types. Obviously, you've got your styles, so stuff like, is it a low magic setting, is it a high magic setting, is it a sci-fi setting, is it a noir setting, is it something more akin to Eberron, which is a mash of noir with high magic and high tech, is it probably more like Theros, where it's sort of based off of something else like Greek culture or Viking culture or something like that? It's sort of starting off with a core idea for the world. And then with that, you think to yourself, okay, what do I want the themes of the campaign to be? Do I want to tackle something like, I don't know, have some sort of theme on grief, or maybe you want to tackle warring nations and how that can affect a world,
Yeah.
or maybe you just want to have a fun adventure romp, and that's where it links back into the gameplay style, because you've got to think, okay, do my party, do they want to go around killing a bunch of monsters? Do they want to be cool detectives? Do they want to be bounty hunters and hunt down criminals? Do they want to help out in a war effort? And it's these questions that sort of makes you think about the world that you're creating and sort of trying to figure out how you're going to run the world as well as what's in the world.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a lot of elements that go into world building, and I believe that I have a very different belief on that because James, you experienced me making order right in front of your own eyes. I
Well, yeah.
started the entire world with a little village called Indo, and I didn't build anything beyond there. All that I know is that I wanted a tiny little village for the start of my campaign to take place in, and a little woods to the side of it that they could perhaps go on adventures in. That is all I had for 3 sessions, and I was perfectly content with that. Uh, and it wasn't until I thought maybe moving on to a different place that I then added a coastal town, a port town to the north of it called Cheersalt, which I completely
Yeah.
improvised the name of, and I'm quite happy about that one.
It was a
Cheersalt,
good
I
name.
think. And it slowly built from there until eventually the party had worked their way over to a capital city, which then I started to pour actual proper world ideas into. I came up I
Yeah.
came up with the origins where it was first elves and then orcs and then they made friends and now it's half elves and half orcs mainly there. And that was the first little bit of history I probably had in my world. And then it grew. I started thinking about what was outside the city as I ran a second campaign based in it that eventually moved out of it. And with a little bit of help from James, we made a little desert place called Savinio, which I based most of that campaign
Yeah.
in, to be fair.
See, it's like with world building, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's you start off with something, whether that's a theme or an idea for a location. In like both examples there, I start off with like, what themes do I want to tackle in my campaign, and how do I make it really philosophical? And Jake's like, okay, so we've got Village A and Village B, and it's you can do completely different things, like depending on how you tackle it. If you have an idea, run wild with it. Start off by thinking, okay, here's my core idea, here's the core concept of what I want to build off of, and then just, think about what makes sense for that. Um, a current sort of thing that I'm sort of like coming up with in my crazy head is obviously I've been watching a lot of Mandalorian recently,
Oh, yeah.
and and it's coming through into my D&D work a lot. I am hopefully going to be playing a Furbolg Ranger, sort of inspired by a Simon Belmont meets Mandalorian type character at some point. Um, but as well as that, I've been coming up with a sort of world with themes similar to Star Wars, but set in a fantasy setting to keep it grounded in D&D. And taking ideas from other locations actually helps a lot. So with me, I'm thinking like, okay, Star Wars has the Rebellion and the Empire. This sort of core thing, kind of like is a basic idea that you can develop off of. Make it different to Star Wars. You can, the rebellion, maybe make them the bad guys. Why are they rebelling? Because they want, I don't know, something evil. Maybe make the Empire good. Twist and turn ideas that you know and turn them into something new to create an entirely different result and see where that can take you.
Oh, definitely. I was having a conversation with Ryan about like him DMing and him not knowing where to start, and I literally said,
Yeah.
step one, plagiarism. Take a
I
stupid
mean,
idea
you're not
from
wrong.
somewhere and put it in, and as long as you change a few names and like don't make it as obvious, you've got a full-on campaign on your hands.
Yeah.
Oh, what was so was originally what was inspiring like the start of when I started to branch off. I was playing through Persona 5 when I was running, and I still am, my Sunday game based in my homebrew world order. And I thought,
Uh,
okay, I'm at this desert section, and this music is so fucking good. Oh my god, I want to make somewhere based around this that would work. So therefore, I adapted and made an adventure for the players to go to in a place called the Beacon of Duska, which is big old jungle temple where Yuan-Ti once lived and got bombed the shit out of by another group. And
Spoilers.
well, yeah, but like also no, because you guys already know that. I think, right?
Well,
It was
yeah.
inferred. Um,
It was inferred, yeah.
and basically, that was my idea for a section of my world building. I was playing a game and I had a cool thing in there that I saw that I wanted to put in and I wanted to share with my players. So therefore, they went on a 5 session romp around the general area of the beacon, and it was
Yeah.
fun as hell. And that's how I generally build my worlds. I don't normally properly expand on a place until like my players go there. Uh, Me and you, James, when we were coming up with your characters, like backstory city, an elven one called Harmith, we came up
Yeah.
with core concepts. We didn't dive deep into them until you were like going there next session. So I decided to make the political
Yeah.
structure and figure out the aesthetic kind of and get some music in and stuff like that. And that's when I
Yeah,
adapted
it
it.
was pretty
Only
good.
really when I needed it. Don't let like a necessity to make everything burden you. I have a bunch of very
Oh.
simple concepts in my world that I haven't built on. There is a Viking realm called Quernald, which all I know so far is that they're like techno Vikings who are like dwarves and humans and Goliaths and stuff, and they have a king and they're all militarized. That's about it. I don't have much else other than that. And one day, maybe if you go there, I'll have more. But I've only really
Yeah.
prepared what I need if you were to just suddenly appear there. And
I mean, if you want to like delve deeper into concepts, like that's not wrong either. You don't ever need to. Like, if you've got a nation that your players aren't really gonna visit, then you know, leave it. You can leave it at the basics. However, if you've got a brain like Matt Mercer, or just a really weird sort of way of working like me, then you can develop concepts of that side of the world. Like, I have figured out that I really like just jumping at like different ideas for a world. With Eberron, I've kind of ended up uh, developing the world in a weird way, where I've created this whole backstory of the first artificer to ever exist, created a series of books that could chronologe like every type of monster in existence, but the book was split into several pieces, which is the creation of different types of monsters, like devils, aberrations, stuff like that. And it sort of created this like idea for a plot hook for me. And I never intended it to be a plot hook. I was just like, oh well, I want to like add some very small amount of lore for no reason other than I can do it. Let's do it. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. If you want to work on something that you don't think your players will ever interact with, go ahead. It's for your own enjoyment as well as the players. But maybe also like try keep it, player focused as well. Like, give them something to do. And another thing that I want to touch on actually is the players are just as important as the DM. They're playing alongside you. They're going to be, writing their characters, and they're babies. I mean, as you mentioned beforehand, Jake, when we were talking about Harmith, we came up with a core concept, and then we just like went wild with the power structure. We were like, how does it work? What's my character's family like? Maybe one of them like is the leader for the nation or something like that.
yeah,
And we ended up creating like so much more of this world that the players like didn't even ever have to see. But it's important to have that relationship between DM and player and sort of respect them and their decisions just as much as they should respect your decisions to the world. Everything should weave together, have your players like got a cool backstory. Maybe you could incorporate that into your world. Think about that kind of stuff, and throw them a bone every now and then. Give them some backstory stuff. Give them like a side mission where they can go see their dad or something. It's a dynamic that you should keep going back to for more information. Because if you're running out of ideas, sometimes your players have some really good ones that you might be able to steal from them.
Yeah, bloody hell. Probably my favorite ever settlement that I've made was derived from a core concept from one of our players who was making a druid, and they'd mentioned a place called Ashdale, where a bunch of weird
Yes.
hippies hang out, and they have a big old tree that's fueled by ash. That place has become quite a centerpiece for a few things, and has resulted in some interesting plot developments as well. All because Rich had a cool idea of a tree that grows instead of in dirt, in ash. And it built from there, I guess. And even then, I'm continuing to expand on that idea that he came up with, because I think it's genuinely interesting. In the next session, perhaps, as you go through where you're next going, you might find some more lore about places that I've perhaps written. Because I'm liking that aspect. And yeah, I am genuinely, like, other places as well. We've just randomly made, for the sake of the players being there. Running a official setting is both a blessing and a curse in a few different ways, because
Yes.
sometimes if you're running a like pre-written world, players will think that that's it and there is nothing more. And like an example of that is I ran Theros for a bit and changed a 2-line like bit about a small town on the coast into the starting town with a lot more in it, and it made it much more meaningful. Sometimes, so like in that Theros game, you were like, "Hey, can I just make somewhere?" And I was like, "Sure, go fucking wild,
Yeah.
make whatever you want, dude. It's our world." So you made a destroyed civilization up in the north, and that
Yeah.
was then implemented into Zilor, and you would have progressively been
Yeah.
going like further up until eventually you like got there, and that was like a big moment.
Yeah, it would have been,
But yeah, I I also want to discuss some of the traps of world building. There is an element to it that people think you need to do, and that is figure out details. Come up with cool concepts, and then maybe come up with plot hooks inside those concepts. I don't really think you need to know the trade routes in between specific locations. If you think that's important, go for it. If you think that there's an adventure to be had in that, sure. But I personally wouldn't go too far in depth into anything unless you feel like it has meaning to it, other than just
yes.
making the world more flowy and believable in a way. Like, I've
Yeah.
worked on interleader relationships between nations in my world, and I've established that most of them are quite strong, but one of them isn't, and they're bound to break anytime soon, which could cause a collapse to their government and perhaps a war to break out. That is the main reason that I wrote that. Not because I just want people to know that they're like all buddies, but that there might be a future adventure to be had in that. And I think that's a fun aspect to
Yeah.
have.
It's a lot of the time when you're setting up stuff for the world, you want to look at areas that the players would want to explore. As mentioned beforehand, like it's important to keep the relationship between you as a DM or you as a player with the other party. It's sort of trying to keep each other engaged. Um, if you want to perhaps include something like some sort of relationship between people to like a relationship between two villages, uh, maybe you could use that as a plot hook. It's always important to link it back to something that the players will be interested by, because if you write something for a world that isn't really going to come up in the campaign, then I mean it's fun to do it for yourself, but there's not a massive need for it, and it's trying to keep the players engaged when you're like sort of trying to use all this stuff. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that point, but it's like try and keep what you're writing interesting for the players, even if it's a plot hook like several sessions down the road that you're probably not that there is a chance you might never come up with. As long as it's still related to what the players will be doing, then that's fine. It's and like one thing that I kind of get a little annoyed about is when people like don't explore areas of the world, but that's fine. Like you might have some really cool ideas for one area of the world and they might never come into play. But try and come up and put the same dedication and passion into other areas of the world and keep that sort of feeling for the players of discovering new things, make them interested with little things. It's just keep stuff interesting for the players.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's also like most of the world building that I've been doing in the past 10 sessions has been impromptu for me. Ever since I took you guys over to the beacon, I realized, oh shit, they're gonna go all around the continent to get to the beacon because it's quite far. So therefore, I then also began to adapt Stolgran, a hill dwarf city that was originally just going to be a peaceful hill dwarf city, but then I decided to take it over with mind flayers. Da da da. And then you guys pushed on north after getting there and realizing, uh-oh, then you went to Ashdale. And I built Ashdale the session before you guys got there. And then you guys went to the beacon, and I built the beacon before you got there. And then I didn't know where the hell you were going to go, and I thought you were just going to kind of fluctuate between them for a bit. And then I realized, oh, they could just go to other places that in the backstory that they like know might be able to help them. And the only really solid place in anyone's backstory that people can go to for help is Harmith, because everyone else's like backstory places were fucked in one way or another.
Yep.
So turns out that was the logical solution. So then I built on Harmith, and now you guys are off to go talk to the mountain dwarves in the dwarf holds, which I also hadn't expanded on, which is what I'm working on right now as we speak. Like after this, I'm probably going to go world build more on the dwarf holds because I got a bunch of weird ass fucking concepts for that. I am a fan of subversion of expectations. I like to take the big old fantasy and flip it on its little head. And James, you're going to get a lot of that next session because I may or may not be using one of Tasha's terrain effects.
So ooh, interesting.
I'm kind of basing the area off that. That's another thing. Find stuff in other books and take it.
Yeah.
I honestly have kind of began to, like, when I fleshed out Eladris a bit more, I looked a little bit at, like, how Eberron formatted things and how Shan worked and took a few ideas from there. So now if you guys go back to Eladris, there might be a couple of Shan elements there.
Oh, yes.
Because I've realized, why don't the wizards get gargoyles to deliver their mail? What the heck? They would do that.
Yeah, it's like cool little ideas like that. Pinch them from everything. Like, I just love that. It's just like the gargoyles delivering mail. It was such a cool idea. But it's things like, for me, I've always had a love of goblins. Specifically, stuff like when I was a wee lad, I used to play Skylanders, as most of my generation did.
Oh, I did as well. It was brilliant.
Yeah. There's one specific Skylander who I can't remember the name of, but he was like a goblin who threw dynamite, and that was his whole thing. He was a goblin who threw dynamite, and I was like, okay, so goblins are like, decent with technology, and one of the levels like had goblins like building technology and stuff, and it made me think like, okay, so goblins are rather adept with technology. And then I come into D&D and I find out, oh, they're all like crazed savages that beat shit with rocks and have like a weird curse called the Nilbog, which is just goblin backwards. And there's like Bogcast? What's a Bogcast? With that, though, I kind of thought to myself, okay, so if this is what D&D is expecting of me, and I have these thoughts on goblins, then how's about I try and subvert expectations and create an entirely different nation where goblins are using technology to create guns, and one of them is like, I'm gonna build a giant dragon
Ah,
and stuff. And hey, look where that led. We had the creation of Goblin Town, which was just in the middle of Savinia in Jake's world. And again, that's the relationship between player and DM. You can create cool locations like that. You can subvert expectations with your DM. Stuff like that. Just develop stuff. It's cool. It's real cool to just implement stuff like that. So
yeah.
do it.
I often find myself I work better with a guideline. So, for example, on my Patreon, I will be putting up polls because I don't fucking know what I want to make. But if someone tells me make magic item, I'll go, oh, okay, that helps, and that will help me. So, like the idea that James brought up when he was coming up with his goblin artificer character Sprout was like, what if there's more than just me? What if I'm not the artificer goblin anomaly? What if I'm like normal?
Exactly.
So therefore, Goblin Town was born, which initially our concept for it was this is a simple as fuck place with a very simple concept because the goblins are simple people.
Yeah.
So like their ideas were stupid as well. There was a whole plot hook for Sprout based on the fact that he was supposed to give like this flamethrower gun from the dragon like a test whirl, even though he thought when he was being brought onto the project he was going to be like a major guy who was coming up with all the ideas, but it turns out he was just
Yeah.
testing shit. And just stupid stuff like that that comes from a fun setting. Often a lot of the stupid quests that I come up with come from stupid settings. The main reason that the Dwarven city Storgran was able to be taken over was because a bunch of Dwergar came up from underneath the mountains and yoinked it, as well as the Mind Flayers. And that was an environmental thing. And I basically just kind of like, when I'm thinking of a plot hook, I'm thinking what is where and why, what is it doing? So when you can see a basilisk coming out of the jungle, or when you can see a yeti coming from the ice, that builds world, weirdly. It can be stuff as
Yeah.
simple as that, because there is a creature native to this land here. I now see this creature, and I think of this land. That is something to compare it to, and therefore I am now more understanding of the world. Tiny little shit like that, weirdly, can make a much more developed place.
Yeah.
But it's fun to just dick around with the world whenever you want to. I've plagiarized so much and put it in there. I made an entire vampire civilization based off the fact that I saw a Tumblr post saying that coconut milk has the same fiber contents as blood. So they're living on a jungle island sort of place and just drinking coconut milk and living life. And that it's some stupid stuff like that can work as well, and it's fun and it's an interesting thing. If I mention that to the entire party, or if my Sunday game listens to this, they're like, wait, what the fuck, there's those in this world, I want to go there. Like, just little stuff like that, it's sweet. Go wild, do whatever,
Yeah. Go crazy.
go stupid. And I suppose with that lovely little message, that will be the end of today's T and D&D. James's phone is vibrating. Hopefully,
Yeah, my phone vibrated.
hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. We try and format this stuff less of like, we are two very professional perma DMs sitting at a table with our legs crossed going, this is how it should be done. I think we just kind of format this stuff as we're just talking to each other like as mates about whatever the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with DMing and world building and whatever, everyone has their own style of doing it. So I'm not going to tell you, you should do this, you should do that. Some people like to be more descriptive, some people like to be less descriptive, some people like to focus on atmosphere, some people like to focus less on atmosphere, some people want to just focus on the numbers. They want to get high damage output or something.
Definitely.
The thing with D&D is we can give you ideas on what to do, but we can't tell you how you should DM your game because we're not your players and we're not you.
Yeah.
D&D is about a collectively enjoyed experience, so try and make that collectively enjoyed experience for your players. This has been my TED Talk. Thanks for listening.
No, me and you have very different DMing styles. I've noticed that
Yes.
you're a very, like, foreshadowy, atmospheric, storytelling,
I do like a bit of atmosphere, yeah.
thematic guy who makes everything seem intricate and layered. I, however, will throw shit at the wall until it sticks and cross my fingers. And both work pretty well, weirdly.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, both work kind of well.
And the main reason that is because we have a group of people we've played with forever who know how we work and at this point have completely adapted to our DMing styles and vibe with it. And if you've got a group of people that like want to go do an entire campaign in Candyland, go ahead. That's fun as hell. I watch Dimension 20 shows. That will give you a lot of inspiration. They base their campaigns in the stupidest places. Fantasy High School, Candyland, New York, just normal New York, etc., etc.
Yeah, normal New York's a pretty interesting place to set a campaign.
It is, because they've got like a wild magic sorcerer crackhead. It's great.
You know what? I actually have a player with the exact same sort of idea, but he was thinking like, "Oh, if I go Wild Magic Barbarian," and I was like, "Do it! That makes sense."
Definitely. But yeah, look at cool shit, put it in your world, make a campaign, and don't even feel restricted to like, I will come up with a big bad evil guy that will destroy everything. I have, because I work better that way. I found out. Having an overarching villain helps me come up with more understanding of why things are happening and where.
Yeah.
Everyone does their own thing. Do your own thing, but also do everything we tell you to, because we are the professionals, and you should only listen to us.
Yes, only listen to us despite what we've been saying for the past like 5 minutes.
Thank you guys for listening. Check out the Discord and the Patreon. They're both in the description. I make a bunch of homebrew shit on Patreon. At the moment, I have a few big projects up, as well as the most recent one I've uploaded is a system to make your own witchery monsters based on Zibashu's system. There's a couple of sample ones on there as well that I like the concept of. The mud crawler is fucking terrifying.
There is some cool stuff on there that I may or may not pinch because that's D&D. Pinch stuff you like,
dude. Put a mud crawler
if you
in
want
the dungeon.
I'll put a mud crawler in that. I mean, if you ever need any more inspiration, probably you could maybe pinch stuff from the Patreon. Maybe check that out in the link in the description. Maybe pinch some of the stuff that's being released on there.
Yeah, dude. Just make a bunch of stuff to steal.
If not, if you don't want to do that, just flick through the monster manual.
Yeah.
That's how I came up with like so many of my plot hooks. I was like, okay, what do I want people to fight today? Well, this hag looks interesting, so let's do that.
The Chimera was pretty fun. How you just suddenly were like, okay, now it's gonna breathe dragon's breath on you, and we were like, ah! Except me, because I'm a monk.
It was just like, all right, so now you all get breathed fire on because this guy's got really high AC, and I'm like, how do I stop that? I know, AOE.
But yeah, thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, comment. Let us know what other stuff you want to see in the future. We'll talk about anything and everything. We have
as long as it's D&D related.
I mean, Maybe, yeah. Who knows? Uh, yeah.
We could talk about like other games that aren't D&D.
RPG systems I've played in
Yeah.
Powered by Apocalypse, and I'm trying to figure out how the fuck Ironsworn works at the moment. So might even talk about that. Because Ironsworn is solo, and it's so hard when you're like playing with no one and you don't understand the game. But it seems fun. So what the hell?
Ah,
But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Au revoir.
adios.
Ciao.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.
So long, farewell.
Well,
Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.